during the malaise era of the 1970s into the 80s, there was all these stories that all of a sudden they lowered compression, reduced octane, and all, and there was a fuel and oil shortage going on and stuff like that around just around the end of the muscle car era, basically. And I've read in shop manuals, right, where they showed early models of small block and big block Chevys were punching out these huge horsepower numbers, and then all of a sudden, right around towards the later 70s with emissions control and that, all of a sudden you were seeing numbers like 155 horsepower and maybe about 270 foot-pounds torque type numbers, right? And with a truck motor like a small block 350 in a truck or an RV, they would typically hit up to about 160, 170 horsepower, but still be able to put out close to pretty close to 400 foot-pounds torque stock. And the reason you saw this or heard about this, like back in the 60s and 70s, you know, like a 327 would still pump out like roughly 300 horsepower, right? And then, you know, a moderate, an impressive amount of torque too, right? But there was a difference in how they dyno tested the engines early on and then later. So all the stories of, you know, the high compression muscle car engines that were pumping out literally horsepower to cubic inch ratio were almost dead on. And then there were stories of modified engines that were pushing more horsepower than cubic inch. But in the early days, they were dyno testing right off the crankshaft, right at the flywheel. So like the engine would still be on a stand, right, freshly built, and before they go to install it into a vehicle, or if it's a special order for something, they spin it up on a dyno and find the nominal amount of power, or the maximum amount of power they can get out of it. Or once they started, okay, no, sorry, I'm not going to say or once they started, sorry, I'm going to go back. So they would just dyno test it right off the flywheel, and of course, you know, you got just the bare engine, and as soon as you punch throttle, it's gonna push power. Okay, so then during what we called the malaise era, a lot of mediocre junk came out from the big three factories, and then a lot of import cars were coming in at the time. They started a dyno test right off the drive wheels, right? So this would be with a engine, transmission, drive shaft to differential, and then they would test it right off the tires of the vehicle. That was where, you know, certain amounts of parasitic drag and various other things going on with drivetrain components will reduce horsepower. And in the world of drag racing high performance stuff, there's certain transmissions where you can still maintain a high amount of horsepower with very little power loss, whereas other transmissions or different type of torque converters will cause also power losses as well, right? So for someone who doesn't want to spin the tires, or in the case of emissions compliance, then they're running the engines a little bit leaner, and it reduces the hydrocarbons and nitrous oxide emissions, right? And I still modified emissions compliant small block V8s, and still got stunning performance out of what should have been just basically a poor runner, you would think. And then later on, I learned, you can still do a little bit of porting to them. You can increase the airflow, right? And if you still wanted to maintain a gentle fuel economy, you don't tamper with a factory set carburetor. You just go down to the junkyard and get another carburetor that you can bone that one up and you know, adjust your idle mixtures, get rid of any part throttle hesitation and things like that. Or if you want full performance off the 4 barrel, then of course you change out, do a few slight adjustments in that to your secondaries, and still punch a high RPM engine. And like I said, the only thing I found, like I personally, I've myth busted. I've done stuff that everybody thinks I'm a liar. Everybody thinks I'm a bullshitter. And I made a car wheelie. I almost wheelied my previous motorhome, you know, and stuff like that. and and a lot of people never believed it. But then on the occasion, you know, I was this horror show on the road when it came to road rage, or you know, all of a sudden I just wanted to go after somebody, right? I frightened people with it because they didn't know how to outrun it. Their vehicles, you know, a lot of people out there are driving these small cars and they think, oh, this is a peppy little car. It's got good acceleration, right? And all of a sudden, much to their surprise, comes an engine that's been punched and ported out a little bit, and and a few other unusual adjustments on a non-emission truck engine that doesn't have EGR or any of the other junk on the underneath even. Right? So, anyways, that's just all I wanted to say. And yeah, no, for those of you out there, keep wrenching.